Hello everybody, this is another video response to Improve Your Faith. The title of the video is, it's a part 2 of the names of God. He sent this particular video to me in an email, so I'm going to go ahead and respond to it. So immediately this video seems to make two mistakes. One of them is that Prove Your Faith seems to be viewing the Bible with a modern Western scope rather than a ancient Jewish scope. Especially if you're going to look at the New Testament or try to compare anything to Jesus to help you understand Jesus more, you have to use a first century Jewish scope to do that. So what the first century Jews think about a certain title or a name or a word that's associated with God matters way more than what a Western modern individual such as Prove Your Faith thinks about those names or titles. So he's using the wrong scope to look at the Bible. And then the second mistake he's doing is he seems to be confusing the difference between a proper name for somebody and all the other names a person can have. For example, my proper name is Michael. It's on my birth certificate. It's what my parents call me. However, there's certain places that if I go there and I hear somebody say, "Hey, Shaggy," I know they're talking to me because where I used to go, they used to call me Shaggy. That was one of my nicknames. My dad, growing up, he called me Squirrely. So if I heard, "Hey, Squirrely," I knew who he was talking to. I've got kids that call me Uncle Mike. They're not my kids, but I know kids that call me Uncle Mike. And so on and so forth. So I have different names. Some people call me Mikey. Some people call me Mike, Michael. You can even call me Ryan because that's my middle name. So there's many names at which I have. However, I do have a proper name. Does God have a proper name? Probably, and it could very well be Yah or Yahweh or the YHVH thing. So the Tetragrammaton. So God has a proper name, but that doesn't mean He doesn't have many other names. There are many titles and names and words associated with God, like it or not. And there are certain things that which the Jews thought about them that have much more significance than what the modern person today thinks about them. Okay, so the first case that's brought up is Exodus 3:14, the whole I am thing, where God tells Moses, I am who I am, tell the people of Israel that I am sent you. And then in Exodus 3:15, we're given God's proper name, and that proper name is Yah or Yahweh or the Tetragrammaton, which means the existing one or the one who is. So basically, in Exodus 3:14, we're given the definition of God's proper name prior to getting God's proper name. And therefore, the implication here is that you cannot use I am as an actual name for God. That's the definition of the proper name. The problem here is that in modern Western thought, well, okay, that makes sense. But how did the Jews view that? In the Jewish world, say first century and going all the way back up to the time of Moses, if you were to claim to be I am, would you be stoned to death for blasphemy because you're claiming to be God? The answer is yes, you would. The Jews felt that I am was a sacred thing as much as God's proper name, and that you cannot associate yourself as being I am or you are claiming to be God. So Western thought doesn't mean diddly here. Jewish thought does. And so if in first century Judaism you are claiming to be I am, you are claiming to be God. Now it is a different argument on whether or not Jesus actually did that. I think that He did several times, but that's a different argument, and that's not really what this video is about. The video is whether or not you can use I am as an actual name for God, and according to the Jews, yes, you can. Does it make sense? I don't really care. But in their context, the name, the actual proper name, the Tetragrammaton, for God was such a sacred thing that they were afraid to use it. So they had several other names and titles and means in which to say God without saying God.
or naming God without naming God. So they use many, I guess the modern way of saying it would be nicknames. They had many nicknames for God. So there are many names for God, but there are not many proper names for God. There's only one proper one, which the Jews were scared to use. See, Adonai is a name. However, it is a nickname. It is a reference to the Lord, but it does go further than that because they replaced the actual proper name with that name. So if you were to actually use Adonai in vain, as Exodus 27 says, do not use God's name in vain, if you were to actually use Adonai in vain, in your heart, as a Jewish person, in your heart, who are you using in vain? You're using God in vain. So, you're taking Exodus 27 way, way too literally, and the Jewish people didn't seem to do that. It's not just the name, it's what's in your heart. And God knows, if, for example, I refer to God as, say, Bob, and every time I say Bob, I mean the God of the Bible, and then I use the name Bob in vain, what am I doing in my heart? So, you're taking it too literally. Then you go on to ask a very silly question, and that is, can we refer to God in the Bible as Zeus? Can we as Buddha? Or can we call him Odin? Well, no, we can't. And the reason why we can't is because the Jews didn't. The whole of the Bible was written by Jews. The Jews never referred to him as Zeus. They never referred to him as Buddha. Therefore, it is not available to me to do so. It is, however, available to me to call him Adonai, to call him Lord, to call him Yahweh, Yah, Jah, Jehovah, Elohim. I can even, according to Jesus, I could just call him Abba if I wanted to. I can just say Abba for the rest of my life, and I'm referring to God, and that's perfectly fine. So the Bible gives me all kinds of names I can use for God. Zeus, Buddha, and Odin obviously aren't among them. That's just silly.
So, of course, the whole point of this video is this.
His name would be Yahweh or Jehovah, the poetic form Yah. This will be his name forever. How then could he change his name to Jesus or Emmanuel?
This is a very old, very tiresome argument that is completely ridiculous, has always been ridiculous, and will forever be ridiculous, and yet will forever be used by people who seem to want to be ridiculous. You see, Jesus is spelled G-E-S-U-S, and Yah is spelled Y-A-H. Therefore, Jesus can't be God. This is ridiculous. In fact, using this line of thinking, you could easily say that God doesn't show up in the New Testament because where is Yah in the New Testament? Who does Jesus pray to? He prays to Abba. That's A-B-B-A. That's not Y-A-H. Therefore, Abba cannot be God. Before I go even further with this, I want to set the whole Jesus thing aside. Let's focus on Emmanuel right now. The argument for the name Emmanuel is not that God's name is Emmanuel. Jesus is given this name by Matthew, therefore Jesus is God. No. The argument is Jesus is called by Matthew God with us. If Jesus is called by Matthew God with us, what then does Matthew think of Jesus? And that's all that argument is. And it doesn't matter at all if Emmanuel is an actual name that could be given to God. All that matters is its definition is God with us, and it's applied to Jesus. That's all that matters. Now we come to two problems. Number one, can God manifest in the flesh and take on a new name while in the flesh? Why couldn't he? If we understand that Jesus is Yah, then where are we going wrong? If Jesus isn't Yah, of course we're going wrong. But if Jesus is Yah, where are we going wrong by calling Yah Jesus? We're not. Can Yah have a proper name but have other nicknames? Well, he has quite a bit in the Old Testament. Why can't he in the New Testament? The second problem is that in the subjugant of the Old Testament, in the Greek, the word there for Yah, Yahweh, or Yah, which of course translates again to Lord, is Kairos, K-Y-R-I-O-S. Well, that just happens to be the very word used in the New Testament to describe Jesus. Imagine that. Okay, so I'm going to give a real quick example because I think I'm running out of time. Romans 10:13, Paul says concerning Jesus, "For everyone who calls in the name of the Lord will be saved." Now this is a quote. This is a quote from the Old Testament, Joel 2:32. And in Joel 2:32, it clearly means God. In Romans, Paul is clearly using it to mean Jesus.